Hello everybody, this is Nojo from Thranda Design, and we're going to pick up right where we left off in the previous video. We're doing taxi and takeoff. Let's go fly. So continuing right along, our taxi checklist, actually pretty simple. Taxi light on, brakes we'll check, so we're going to release the brakes. Now at lighter weights that's usually enough to get you rolling, because at idle we have quite a bit of idle thrust. And yeah, we're slightly rolling. But at heavy weights like this, we'll probably need a little bit of power, so I'm going to give us a little bit of power here, and I'm holding some right rudder to get us turned to the right. Now the nose wheel steers plus and minus 15 degrees left and right of center with the rudder. Beyond that we can use differential braking to turn tighter. So if you're using a set of hardware pedals with individual differential brakes axes, then that's easy. But if you're like me and you're using just a twist grip joystick, then X-Plane's going to automatically add that for you. So if I go left and right, we can see the nose wheel is steering. But if I go hard left, it's going to apply brakes, and it'll let us pivot right around that wheel. Same thing to the right. Usually, because we're using brakes, we'll have to add a little bit of power to get around. So you can expect for maneuvering in tight spaces, add a little power, hold that brake, and just pivot the plane right on around. Let's get out here to the taxi line. Now as we turn, we're going to check our gyro instruments, make sure they're working. Attitude indicator should stay upright, and our HSI and RMI should swing with the turn, as does our magnetic compass. And then the turn coordinator should turn in the correct direction, and the ball should go to the outside of the corner. So that's all looking good. Now, as we're taxiing here, even at idle there's a fair amount of idle thrust, so it's pretty common to get going too fast, especially if we're going downwind or downhill. So what we can do is we can use beta, and I have a button on my joystick assigned to X-Plane's toggle beta command. When I do that, moving the joystick forward actually goes aft into beta, and moving it back to idle goes back to idle. Now what beta is, the engine turbine speed doesn't change, it's just sitting there at idle, but the propeller blade angle goes flat, and so essentially what we're doing is we're going into a zero thrust condition. If we need more than that, we can actually go into reverse with X-Plane's toggle reverse command. And so now, as I push forward on the throttle, the handle goes further aft, and it becomes a powered reverse. The turbine speed increases while the blades go negative. And if I come back to idle, it goes back to idle. So you can see it's even pushing us backward from that reverse thrust. So using beta and reverse is really useful when taxiing. Most of the time we won't even use the brakes except for differential braking to turn. So let's go up to the end of this taxiway here, and we're going to do our engine run up once we get there. Alright, a little bit of brakes, a little bit of differential brakes, get us pointed toward the runway here. We'll come to a stop. We're going to come out of beta, just so we get some nice cooling airflow, so the exhaust isn't cooking our cargo pod. Let's go to before takeoff. So we'll just run through this. Parking brake, set. Seat belts, shoulder harnesses, check secure. Flight controls, free and correct. So they are free. Flight instruments, check and set. So this should show 0. This should be upright. Altimeter, 1013, and it should show about 440 feet at this airport. That's correct. Vertical speed is 0. And our HSI showing 125 degrees. That matches with the magnetic compass. Same with the RMI. Turn coordinator is level and the ball is centered. So, fuel boost switch. Recheck norm. We're just going to recheck a bunch of stuff. Fuel tank selectors, recheck both on. Fuel quantity, recheck, still good. Firewall fuel shutoff, recheck fully in. Elevator, aileron, rudder trim. Check set for takeoff. So elevator, aileron, and rudder, those are all set for takeoff. Now we're going to do our run up. So we're going to bring the power up to 400 foot-pounds of torque. Now, because the torque will decrease as RPM increases, we'll actually bring it up to like about 500 and stop there. And then, yeah, there we go. As the prop RPM comes up, we come down to about 400. Bump it up a touch. Good. Suction gauge, check. Volt ammeter, check. And then return selector to battery position. So we're pulling 25 amps on the generator. Our voltage is good at 28. Set it back to battery, not discharging. Now our boot pressure. This is our de-ice boots on the leading edge of the wings and tail. Normally we only do this test if we're going into icing conditions, but let's do this now. The boot pressure, this is a spring-loaded switch. We're going to momentarily move it up and release. And after 3 seconds, we should see this de-ice pressure light come on. Good. And it should stay on for about 3 seconds. Good. And it goes off. and comes on again, and it's going to come on a total of 3 times as the de-ice boots sequence through their de-ice sequence. After that 3rd time, now they should just be off. And if we are in icing conditions and we want to do another sequence, we just bump it up to auto again to do another sequence. Now we're going to move it down to manual and hold it. And as long as it's held, within about 6 seconds we should get pressure. Good, there it is. And as long as we hold the switch down, we should have pressure until we release. Just like that, and it goes out. So good, our de-ice boots check is correct. Now inertial separator, we're in bypass right now. When we push it into norm, we should get a very small increase in torque. It's going to be really subtle. So we went from about 380 to about 410. Good. So we'll pull it back out to bypass. Engine instruments, we're just going to check through this. Our oil pressure is in the green, as is our temperature. Everything looks good. Overspeed governor. So right now our prop RPM is about just below 1800. We're going to press and hold this overspeed governor check, and it's going to engage the propeller overspeed governor. It should bring it down to 1650 RPM. As we increase the power lever to increase torque, the RPM should remain at 1650. That's good. So now we'll come power lever idle, and we'll release the button. So our overspeed governor check is complete. Now we're going to check the standby power system. So standby power switch is currently off. We're going to turn it on, and we verify the in-op light extinguishes. We're going to load the generator to approximately 30 amps, so let's go to generator. Let's turn on the pitot-static heat. Good, oh yeah, that's up to almost 50 amps. So now we're going to select standby alternator on the ammeter. It should show 0, which it does. Now, we're going to trip the generator. So the generator is off, we verify standby electric power light comes on, and sure enough, the standby alternator has just taken the load, up to about 50. Good. Now we're going to reset the generator. So the generator's on, standby power on, light extinguishes, and the standby alternator is no longer taking the load, and we can check the voltage. Generator's showing good voltage. Return to battery. All right. And standby power switch, we're going to leave it on for flight. So good check there. Autopilot, we're going to verify the pre-flight test is complete, which it is, and we'll just go ahead and set in 2,500 for our initial altitude. Propeller anti-icing system, also if we're going to be flying in icing conditions, but we can check it now. Let's turn off that pitot-static, and we're actually going to bring the condition lever up a little bit to bring our idle speed up so that we don't bog down the engine when we do this test, because this draws about 25 amps. So, prop anti-ice switch, up to auto. We verify prop anti-ice amps comes up into the green, which it does. It should be, on auto, it's 90 seconds on, 90 seconds off, but I don't want to wait and watch the sequence, so that's good. Now let's turn it off, it goes back to 0, and set it down to manual, comes back up into the green. In manual, it won't sequence, it'll just be on permanently until you turn the switch off. So good, prop anti-ice is working. So avionics and weather radar, check and set. This is where we'd set up our radios, set up our courses, all of that. Weather radar, we're going to leave off for now. Stall heat, windshield heat, prop anti-ice as required. So we're going to go pitot heat and stall heat on. Window off, we don't need the prop anti-ice. Good. Strobe lights, landing lights on. Oh, sorry, I did that out of sequence. But anyway, strobe lights and landing lights are coming on for takeoff. Annunciators, extinguished or considered. Nothing on, that's good. Wing flaps, set. In the Caravan 675, we'll use typically 10 degrees, which is there. But in the Grand Caravan, we're going to use 20 always. So that's there. Set 20, indicating 20. And if we go to the outside view, they are indeed at 20. Okay, almost there. So cabin heat mixing air control push for flight, that's this guy. Window, closed. Our window is closed. Brakes, we're going to release, and we're going to go to high idle, and then standby power switch verifying it's on, and the in-off light is off. Okay, that takes us to takeoff. So let's say we are cleared for takeoff, so we're going to release these brakes. Now at high idle especially, as we move up to high idle on the condition lever, there it is. At high idle we have a lot of idle thrust, so we'll definitely want to use some beta. So we're going to taxi here to line up with the runway, and we're going to come to a stop for this takeoff. That'll give us some time. I'm going to go into beta. Oh, I love the sound of a propeller in beta. So we'll line up with the center line. using rudder and a little differential braking as needed. There we go. Come to a stop, bonk, and back to idle, come out of beta. So, wing flaps are set. Yes, they are. Power set for takeoff. Observe engine limitations. So our limitation is going to be this first red line at 1865 foot-pounds of torque. We're going to bring it up to about 1800 because we will get a rise in torque as we start accelerating. Max ITT for takeoff's 805 for 5 minutes, but we're well below that. Engine gauges look good. Okay, we're going to release. So, power set, gauge is green, airspeed coming alive. We're going to rotate at 70, and we'll pitch to climb out at 85 initially. So there's 60 knots, 70, rotate. We just kind of rise up off that runway. Now we're pretty heavy, so we're not climbing that steeply right now. We're going to kind of hold that nose down a little, let that speed come up. There's 85. All right. Now, usually at about 1,000 feet we'll go through our climb check, but we're going to do it now just for brevity. So we're above 85. Whoops, actually no we're not. Let's lower that nose. Once we're above 85, we'll retract the flaps to 10. There it is. So flaps up to 10. And we're going to need to roll in some nose-up trim. We're going to start our crosswind turn here. And as we accelerate past 95, hold that nose down just a touch. There it is. Flaps up to retracted, a little bit more nose-up trim. And now, for a maximum performance climb, we can go for about 104 knots at sea level at max gross weight. But that gives a really steep deck angle, so we're going to accelerate on up to about 120. So our cruise climb is going to be about 120 knots. So I'm just trimming, letting that speed accelerate up to 120. And now that we're clear of obstacles, we're going to push that inertial separator in. And when we do that, we're going to get a jump in torque. So I'm going to actually decrease the torque to make sure we're not going to exceed redline. Inertial separator in. There we go. And we see how the torque came up. Now for that initial climb, we can use a maximum of 1865 foot-pounds of torque, or 765 degrees on the ITT, which is it's in between these. Most operators actually use 740, so temperature is just fine. So there we go. We taxied the plane and we successfully took off, and here we are flying it. Oh joy! So the next video we'll look at some more in-flight stuff, including getting up to landing. So I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you'll join me for the next one. Thank you.